Are African Americans the true Indigenous Americans? Or are they simply birthright citizens granted a place in America through amendments and legal adjustments? Controversial claims are resurfacing, challenging the very foundation of Black identity in America. But what does history actually say? Recently, far-right podcaster Elijah Schaffer made a shocking claim that Black people are not real Americans, only given citizenship through amendments. President Trump has weighed in, saying the 14th Amendment was added just for the children of slaves. But what does this mean? And is there a deeper truth behind Black history in America? The idea that Black Americans are not true Americans raises serious questions about history, citizenship, and identity. The 14th Amendment, passed in 1868, granted birthright citizenship to formerly enslaved people. But does legal citizenship determine who is truly indigenous to this land? Historical evidence suggests that African-descended people have been in the Americas for thousands of years. Some artifacts and carvings found in the U.S. bear striking resemblances to African designs, hinting at early transatlantic contact long before Columbus. In 1828, Webster's dictionary defined American as a native of America, originally applied to the Aboriginals or copper-colored races found here by the Europeans. This description closely matches the skin tones of many African Americans today. Could it be that the original identity of Black people in America was intentionally erased and replaced with terms like Negro, colored, and African American? Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. fought for justice, but did he also know the truth about Black identity? The Civil Rights Act of 1968, signed just a week after his assassination, included the Indian Civil Rights Act, but made no mention of Negro or African American by race. Was this an oversight, or did Dr. King recognize that Black Americans were the true indigenous people of this land? Dr. King said, 100 years later, the Negro is still languishing in the corners of American society and finds himself an exile in his own land. Exile in his own land? These words carry deep meaning. Was Dr. King acknowledging that Black Americans are the original people of this country? What's next? Now, in 2025, the U.S. Supreme Court is facing cases that could challenge birthright citizenship. If the 14th Amendment is overturned, what does that mean for African Americans? Will history repeat itself in the erasure of identity? The truth about Black identity in America is deeper than we've been told. Are African Americans the true indigenous people of this land? What do you think? Let's start the conversation.
Tell them, Doctor. Today I want to say to the state of Alabama, yes.
How African Americans fought and won. Birthright citizenship, the 14th Amendment, and the Dred Scott case. Did you know that at one point in U.S. history, African Americans were denied the right to be U.S. citizens, no matter where they were born? The infamous Dred Scott versus Sandford case ruled that Black people had no rights under the Constitution. But through resilience, activism, and legal battles, African Americans fought and won birthright citizenship with the 14th Amendment, one of the most powerful protections in U.S. history. Welcome to today's video, where we uncover how the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments reshaped American history and secured fundamental rights for African Americans. From slavery to citizenship and voting rights, let's break down how these amendments transformed the nation. In 1857, the Supreme Court ruled in Dred Scott versus Sandford that African Americans, enslaved or free, were not U.S. citizens and had no legal standing. This decision reinforced slavery, emboldened the South, and denied Black people basic human rights. But the fight wasn't over. The Civil War, the abolition movement, and African American resistance led to the Reconstruction Amendments, legal victories that changed everything. Exploration of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. 13th Amendment, 1865, ending slavery. Slavery was abolished, but freedom alone wasn't enough. Black people still lacked citizenship and legal protection. 14th Amendment, 1868. Birthright citizenship and equal protection. This amendment overturned Dred Scott and made it clear: if you are born in the U.S., you are a citizen, no matter your race. It also guaranteed equal protection under the law, a foundation for future civil rights battles. 15th Amendment, 1870. Voting rights. African American men were granted the right to vote, but systemic racism and Jim Crow laws made this a battle that continues to this day. But these rights didn't come easily. Even after these amendments, Black Americans faced voter suppression, segregation, and racial violence. The civil rights movement of the 1960s fought to enforce these rights, leading to landmark laws like the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And today, the fight continues, with ongoing debates about voter suppression, systemic racism, and equal rights under the law. The 14th Amendment remains one of the most powerful laws protecting the rights of all Americans. It was won through the blood, what if I told you, sweat, that many African Americans were once classified as Native Americans. For centuries, the U.S. government and colonial powers reclassified Indigenous people, labeling them as Negro, mulatto, or colored to erase their identity, steal land, and justify enslavement. But how did this happen? And what does history say about the African and Native American connection? Stay tuned as we uncover the hidden history of racial reclassification, a shocking truth that has been buried for generations. Welcome to today's video. If you're interested in lost history, Black and Indigenous ancestry, and the truth behind racial classifications, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into hidden history. Today, we're exploring a controversial but important topic. Were some African Americans originally Native Americans before being reclassified as Negro or mulatto? How did the U.S. Census, laws, and policies erase Indigenous identity? And what evidence do we have that supports this hidden history? Let's dive in. One of the biggest historical manipulations was the forced reclassification of Indigenous people. What does this mean? Before the 1800s, many Native Americans were listed as Indian on legal documents. After policies like the Indian Removal Act, 1830, those who stayed in the South and East were reclassified as Negro or mulatto. This erased their Indigenous identity and made it easier to strip them of land, rights, and tribal affiliation. Examples of reclassification. The 1835 North Carolina census reclassified some Native American tribes as free people of color. Virginia's 1705 slave codes grouped Native Americans with Africans to justify enslavement. The Lumbee tribe of North Carolina was denied Native recognition and labeled colored. Why? Because recognizing them as native would mean acknowledging their land rights. This was a form of paper genocide, erasing an entire people's history through bureaucratic means. Did Native Americans and Africans mix? Absolutely. The 5 civilized tribes, Cherokee, Creek, Chickasaw, Choctaw, and Seminole, had Black members through intermarriage, adoption, and slavery. Some enslaved Africans escaped and joined Native tribes, blending cultures. The Seminole Nation of Florida had Black Seminoles who fought against U.S. forces in the 1800s. Books that confirm this: Africans and Native Americans by Jack D. Forbes, The Blood of the Earth by Jace Weaver. But despite these connections, the U.S. government reclassified Black Native people as only Negro to cut off their tribal rights. The 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, stripping identity. Even after slavery was abolished, racial reclassification continued. The 13th Amendment, 1865, freed enslaved people, but did not restore Native identities. The 14th Amendment, 1868, granted birthright citizenship, but forced many Native African people into a single racial category, Black. The 15th Amendment, 1870, gave Black men voting rights, but ignored Indigenous voting struggles. As a result, many Indigenous Black communities were permanently erased from history, forced into a racial identity they did not choose. Key moment. What this means today. Even today, the descendants of reclassified Native Americans often don't know their full ancestry. Why is this important? It explains why some African Americans have Native American ancestry, but no tribal records. It highlights the systematic erasure of Indigenous land claims. It reveals how race in America was socially constructed for control. Many African Americans today may be descendants of reclassified Native Americans, their identity stolen by history. Conclusion: what can we learn? The U.S. government used racial reclassification to erase Indigenous identity, justify land theft, and enforce control. So what can we do? Research your ancestry, dig into old census records, learn about laws that reclassified Indigenous and African identities. Keep sharing hidden history, because knowledge is power.
But some other feeling still strong, like I'll be